All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we are going to be looking at electoral votes' latest news update. And wow, there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, there really is.
We've got potential government shutdown looming. Elon Musk is somehow involved in the budget debate. And a couple of legal battles are brewing that could have a big impact on, well, the media and reproductive rights.
Buckle up.
Yeah.
It's going to be a wild ride.
So first up, this potential government shutdown.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about this one? It's not like your typical political game of chicken. This time we've got Elon Musk throwing his weight around, and it seems like he's really changing the game.
It's kind of wild to see him basically dictating terms to members of Congress through Twitter.
Right.
Like, he's out there criticizing the proposed budget resolution, threatening primary challenges, and he's even saying that a shutdown wouldn't be that bad.
Yeah.
I mean, is he really that out of touch with how a shutdown would actually affect people?
Well, it's hard to say what's going on in Elon's head, but his approach is really fascinating because it shows us how power dynamics are changing. You know, he's not tied to the traditional political machine or donor networks. He's got so much wealth, and his platform gives him this independence that lets him operate outside the usual norms. And that's a big deal, especially when you see people like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance taking cues from him.
Yeah, it's almost like we're seeing a new kind of political system emerging,
Right.
where loyalty to Musk and his ideology is more important than party affiliation or political experience. I mean, what does this mean for the future of the Republican Party?
Yeah.
And for our whole political system?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've seen how quickly Trump's inner circle changes. Anyone who falls out of favor disappears. But Musk's power is different. It's not built on relationships or political maneuvering. It comes from his own wealth and his control over a huge media platform. It's a much stronger base. And it gives him a level of influence that even Trump might be jealous of.
Yeah, the betting markets seem to agree. The odds of a shutdown have gone way up since Musk started tweeting about it.
It's crazy.
So what can House Speaker Mike Johnson even do at this point? He's got to try to keep different factions in his own party happy. He's got to appease the Democrats. And now he has to worry about what Elon Musk is saying on Twitter. Talk about a tough spot.
It's a total minefield. And it's not just about this budget. It's about setting a precedent. If Musk can call the shots now, what's to stop him from doing it again in the future? Are we heading towards a world where billionaires can basically hold the government hostage with their money and their media platforms?
Okay, well, let's take a break from the potential government shutdown for a minute and talk about something a little less apocalyptic.
Okay.
The House Ethics Committee is about to release its report on Matt Gaetz, and the timing is interesting to say the least.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So just as a reminder, Gaetz has been under investigation for allegations of sex trafficking and having sex with a minor.
These accusations have been following him for a while now, and this report could really affect his political future, especially his hopes of becoming governor of Florida.
Well, of course, Gaetz went on Twitter to respond. And let's just say it was typical Gaetz. He didn't actually address the accusations. He just tried to make himself look like the victim of some political witch hunt.
Right. His response was like a student who got caught cheating and then tries to change the subject.
Exactly.
Like asking, well, which question did I supposedly cheat on? It might work on the public, but it's not going to fly with the House Ethics Committee. They play by a different set of rules.
Yeah. And it's kind of strange that they're releasing this report publicly. They're not exactly known for being transparent. So this makes me think they might have found something pretty serious. Why do you think they're doing this now? Yeah, the timing is definitely curious. It could be a way to pressure Gaetz to resign or to weaken his position in the Republican Party. Or maybe they just feel like the public has a right to know what they found, especially given how serious these allegations are. Whatever the reason, this report is going to get a lot of attention, and it could be a real problem for Gaetz.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Speaking of political futures, that might be in trouble. Let's talk about President Biden.
Oh, boy.
His approval rating has dropped to 34%,
Yikes.
which puts him in the same category as Jimmy Carter, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump. They all left office with similar numbers.
Okay, so not exactly a great club to be a part of when you're hoping to get reelected. But does a low approval rating at this point really mean Biden's chances are doomed? We're still a year away from the election. A lot can change.
Yeah, you're right. It's not a guarantee he'll lose.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a warning sign. Historically, when presidents leave office with low approval ratings, their party tends to struggle in the next election.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It usually means that people are unhappy with the way things are going in the country. And that can be hard to turn around, even with a new candidate.
But wouldn't you say that Biden's situation is a little different? I mean, he's not facing the same kind of scandals or controversies as some of those other presidents.
True, he's not dealing with corruption charges or impeachment,
Mm-hmm.
but he also doesn't have the same kind of charisma or ability to connect with voters emotionally, like Bill Clinton had, for example.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And let's not forget, he's the oldest president ever. That's something voters are definitely thinking about.
So if Biden does decide to run again, what are his chances? Can he turn things around? Or is this a sign that the Democrats need to start looking for someone new?
Tough to say. It really depends on what happens with the economy, how these legal battles we talked about turn out,
Hmm.
and frankly, whether Trump decides to run again. A Biden-Trump rematch would be a whole other story, and it's impossible to predict how that would go.
Okay, well, if Biden steps aside, there are plenty of Democrats waiting to take his place. We even asked our listeners to help us put together a list of potential candidates for 2028.
Yeah, we got some really interesting suggestions.
We did. It's a pretty diverse group. We've got experienced politicians like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren,
Right.
rising stars like Pete Buttigieg and Gavin Newsom, and we even got some wild card entries like George Clooney and Taylor Swift.
Which is pretty funny.
Yeah, it's a long shot for sure. But it shows that people are looking for new faces and new ideas in politics.
It definitely does.
So let's talk about some of these potential candidates.
Yeah.
What would a Kamala Harris candidacy look like? She's obviously well known and she's got experience, but her last presidential run didn't go so well.
Yeah, Harris would have a lot to prove. She'd need to convince voters that she's learned from her past mistakes and that she's the right person to lead the country. She'd also have to balance the different groups within the Democratic Party.
Right, appeal to both progressives and moderates. Not an easy task.
Not at all.
What about someone like Pete Buttigieg? He's young, he's charismatic, and he's got a good track record in government.
But Buttigieg is a really interesting candidate. He's smart, he's a great speaker, and he seems to connect well with voters. But he'd need to overcome concerns about his lack of experience on the national level.
Yeah, he hasn't held a federal office yet.
Exactly. And he'd need to flesh out his policy positions.
Okay. Then there's Gavin Newsom. He's been making a lot of noise with his policies in California, and he's been very critical of the Republican Party.
Newsom is a powerful figure. He's got the charisma, the experience, and the progressive credentials to be a real contender.
He does.
But he'd need to show that his success in California can translate to the national level.
And of course, we can't forget about the big question, will Hillary Clinton try to make a comeback in 2028?
I never say never in politics, right?
Mhm.
Clinton is still popular with a lot of Democrats.
Yeah.
And she knows a lot about policy and how the government works.
Yeah, but she'd also be carrying the weight of her 2016 loss.
Exactly. It's hard to imagine her generating the same level of excitement as she did back then.
And then there are those wild card entries, George Clooney and Taylor Swift. It's fun to think about. But do they really have a chance?
They're definitely long shots.
Yeah.
They don't have the political experience or the policy knowledge that voters usually look for in a president, but they represent something that a lot of Americans are craving:
What's that?
authenticity, a fresh perspective, a willingness to shake things up.
Yeah, I get that.
It would be interesting to see how they could change the race. Even if they don't win,
Yeah.
they might force the other candidates to address issues they might otherwise ignore.
Yeah, and they might inspire more young people to get involved in politics, which is always a good thing.
Absolutely. So as we look ahead to 2028, it's clear that the Democratic field is wide open. There are lots of possibilities.
It is.
And let's not forget, the Republican Party is going through its own changes too,
Yeah.
with Elon Musk becoming more influential and people like Matt Gaetz facing legal troubles.
Yeah, it's a whole new world.
The political landscape is definitely shifting. Yeah. And the 2028 election is going to be a really important moment for our country.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about a couple of legal battles that could have big consequences.
Okay.
Starting with Trump's lawsuit against the Des Moines Register and pollster Ann Seltzer.
Ah, yes. This lawsuit is a classic Trump move. He's basically using the legal system to bully his critics and try to silence anyone who questions him.
So what's he claiming exactly?
He says that the last Seltzer poll before the Iowa caucus was rigged to hurt his campaign,
Interesting.
but he hasn't provided any real evidence to support that claim.
It sounds like another one of his publicity stunts.
It really does. You know, a way to distract from his own legal problems and make people distrust the media and the whole election process.
But it's dangerous, right? I mean, even if this lawsuit gets thrown out, which seems likely, it still does damage.
Absolutely. Smaller media outlets, especially those that don't have a lot of money to fight back, might be afraid to publish anything critical of Trump because they don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
That's a scary thought.
It is. It creates this atmosphere of fear and self-censorship, which is really bad for a free press. That's why some people have been talking about creating a media defense fund to help support journalists and news organizations that are attacked like this.
That's a great idea, because if we let Trump silence the media, we all lose. A free press is essential for a democracy.
I completely agree. A free press holds those in power accountable, informs the public, and gives a platform to different voices and perspectives.
All right, now for the second legal battle we're watching, let's talk about Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's lawsuit against a New York doctor who prescribed abortion medication through telehealth to a Texas resident.
Yeah, this case is a big deal. It raises some serious questions about jurisdiction and states trying to overreach their authority.
So what's the issue here?
It's basically a state trying to force its laws on people in other states. And that could set a dangerous precedent. If Texas can sue a doctor in New York for providing legal medical care to a patient in another state, then what's stopping other states from doing the same thing? Yeah, it seems like a clear violation of the doctor's rights and an attempt to restrict access to abortion even across state lines.
It shows that the fight for reproductive rights is far from over. Even though Roe v. Wade was overturned, states like Texas are still trying to control women's bodies.
And this whole thing gets even more complicated because the woman's boyfriend might have been the one who reported her to the authorities.
Yeah, it's really disturbing. It shows how these laws can create fear and mistrust in relationships and make women afraid to seek medical care. They might worry that their partners or even their friends and family could report them.
It's a scary situation. And it highlights how important it is to fight back against these attempts to take away reproductive rights and criminalize women's healthcare decisions.
I agree. This case is just getting started, but is one we'll be watching closely because it could have a major impact on access to healthcare, the right to privacy, and the balance of power between states.
Yeah, it is a lot to think about, all these legal battles and how they could affect us in ways we don't even realize.
It really makes you realize we can't take our rights for granted. We have to stay informed and be ready to fight for what we believe in.
I agree with that. So before we wrap up this deep dive, let's go back to that list of potential Democratic candidates for 2028. We talked about the big names. But there are some other names on that list that I found really interesting.
Yeah, those wildcard entries are always fun to think about. They may not have the political experience, but they often bring new ideas and a desire for change.
Right. So let's start with George Clooney. He's been involved in politics for years, and he definitely has that Hollywood charm. Could he actually run for president?
Clooney's got the star power and name recognition to get people's attention, and his humanitarian work shows that he cares about making a difference. But could he turn that into a successful political campaign? It's hard to say.
Yeah, he'd have to prove he's more than just a famous actor. He'd need to show that he really understands the issues and that he has a clear vision for the country.
And he'd have to be ready for the intense scrutiny that comes with running for president. Every part of his life would be examined.
Then there's Taylor Swift. She's a huge cultural icon with a ton of fans, especially among young people. Could she use that to create a political movement?
There's no doubt that Swift can get young people involved.
Yeah.
She's been speaking out more about her political beliefs, and she's used her platform to support causes she cares about. But running for president is a whole other level.
Right. She'd be going up against experienced politicians and political strategists.
Exactly.
And the media can be brutal.
Oh, yeah, it would be a real test.
She'd also need to come up with some serious policy ideas.
Right. It can't just be catchy slogans and Instagram posts.
Yeah.
Voters would want to know what her plans are for the country.
So it's interesting to think about how these less traditional candidates could change the race. They might not win, but they could shake things up.
Definitely. They might force the other candidates to talk about issues they would rather ignore.
And they could get a whole new generation of people excited about politics.
Which is never a bad thing.
So as we finish up this deep dive, I'm feeling a mix of hope and worry. We're facing some big challenges, political divisions, economic uncertainty, climate change, threats to our democracy. It's a lot.
It is, but there are also reasons to be hopeful. We see people from all backgrounds demanding change and fighting for a better future.
That's true. It reminds us that we're not helpless. We have a voice, we can vote, and we can make a difference in our country.
Exactly. So stay informed, stay involved,
Yeah.
and don't give up. We can create the future we want.
Well said. So we'll leave you with this thought. How are you going to get involved? What will you do to make the world a better place? Until next time, keep diving deep.